Hello and welcome to the second introduction session to the TRENTOS SDK. My name is Matthias Buhl. I'm a software developer here at HENSOLDT Cyber, and in this session we will take a closer look at how the Docker build and test environment is set up and how you can use it to compile and run your first TRENTOS system. If you haven't gone through the previous session yet, where we go through the installation steps of the SDK itself, you might want to pause here and watch that session first, come back, because this will make it easier to follow along with the current session. Let's get right into it and open the Getting Started documentation that will help us with the installation process. In this session, I will mainly focus on the Getting Started section of the TRENTOS Docker environment to build our first TRENTOS system and to demonstrate how to run it in an emulated environment. Before we continue, you must have the Docker engine already installed on your development machine. It's a prerequisite to everything that follows from here. If you do not already have the Docker engine installed on your development machine, put the current session on hold and install it before you continue. You can find instructions on how to install the Docker engine by following the link provided here in the documentation. When you're ready, you can restart the session and follow the next steps. The SDK provides two archives of Docker containers. If we open up the Docker folder, we have the archives right here. One contains the build environment and the other contains the test environment. To install the two images on your machine, just open up a terminal in this current Docker folder and run the command provided in the documentation. We will enter the SDK root directory and from there, install the image for the build container. After that, we will repeat the same process for the test container image. The build environment image is quite large, so expect this process to take a few minutes. Alright, the build image has been successfully installed, and we'll repeat the same step to install the image for the test container. And this should be a quick installation now because the image for the test container is a lot lighter than the image for the build container, which is also the reason why they are separated. We have successfully installed the test container as well. Now we can verify that both containers installed successfully for both images by running the respective Docker command. As we can see from the output, both images are installed and ready to be used. And this brings us to the next point. How can these images be used? And there are essentially two different ways for the build and test images to be used. Either in a interactive mode by using a shell inside the container, or non-interactively by only running the container to execute a command or script inside of it and then basically make it stop again. So if you've worked with Docker before, these possible options are probably not new to you. However, it is still recommended to take a closer look at these utility scripts provided with the SDK, as these scripts can make the usage of these modes quite convenient. For example, if you want to open the TRENTOS build container in an interactive mode, you just have to run the open TRENTOS build env script from the SDK. For the non-interactive mode, you should run the same script, open a TRENTOS build environment, but now pass a command to it or the path to a script that should be executed within the container. Just be aware that the current directory from which you run the script will be mounted into the Docker container, which means that the container will have access to the subfolders, but not the parent folder. In case you have issues here, check the location you're running the script from and see if this aligns with what the command or the scripts you are trying to run inside the container expect. All right, with all that covered, let's go ahead and build our first TRENTOS system and run it in QEMU. So what we want to do when we build a TRENTOS system is run the build container with the utility script, as we just learned, and let it execute the master build script from within the build container. The build system script itself takes in several arguments. So we first need to follow it with the project directory that contains the source files for the project to be built. So in this case, we will set it to the Hello World demo. Then we specify the hardware platform, which the system shall be compiled for. So in this case, it will be the Zinc 7000, which targets the Xilinx Zinc 7000 system on a chip, which can be emulated by QEMU. The build Zinc 7000 demo hello world argument then sets the output directory, which will be created and will contain the build artifacts. And finally, we will specify the build type. So in this case, we'll set it to debug, So the CMake build system will create a debug build. Now let's take this complete command and run it in the terminal and check if we get the expected output message indicating that the build succeeded. So it looks like the build went through without any issues, and we can go ahead and run the system image that has been created in QEMU. If we look at the example provided here, the command will take us into the build folder that was just created, this time open the test container instead of the build container, and let it execute the custom run script inside the container. And there we have it. The traditional Hello World message is displayed, letting us know that the application ran successfully. So congratulations! You've just built and run your first TRENTOS system. Now what are the next steps and where can you go from here? Well, in this current session, we ran our first secured TRENTOS system in an emulated environment, and therefore an interesting next step could be to run the same kind of system on one of these supported hardware platforms. All necessary steps for that to reach this can directly be found in this getting started, so you could just naturally follow along. But of course you could also take a closer look at the SCL4 microkernel or the CAMKIS framework to get a better understanding of the underlying layers of every TRENTOS system. You can also use the documentation to get a better understanding of the provided components by the SDK and how they could be utilized in your upcoming projects. And once you feel like you have a good understanding of the whole TRENTOS ecosystem, you then can of course go ahead and start building your own TRENTOS systems. That is all for this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned and make sure to check out our upcoming sessions.